Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my March wrap-up. So I had a pretty decent reading month in March. I managed to finish 10 books, which honestly is pretty surprising to me. I've been having a really good reading year so far, but I don't really want to jinx that. I ended up reading a total of 10 books for a total of 4,862 pages. 3 of those were arcs, and 2 of them were rereads, and then 1 I actually did end up DNFing. That's not included in the 10 total. That's like in addition to that, I ended up DNFing 1. I'll talk about that a little bit later. If we're gonna get into my series counts, then technically I read 5 books in new series, 4 books in continuing series, and then 1 book that was a standalone. For my formats, 2 of those I read only physically. 1 I read only in ebook form. 2 of them I read both physically and by ebook, and 1 I read physically, audibly, and in ebook. Fairly predictably in terms of genres, I ended up reading 6 fantasies and 4 romance. And then for my star ratings, I had 3 3-stars, 3 4-stars, and 4 5-stars. And then finally, in terms of the age range, 9 of them were adult and 1 was a young adult. So let's talk about the books that I actually finished, the first of which is Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. This has been a long time coming, guys. I started reading this in like November or December, but I had a lot of personal stuff going on at the time, so I just kind of gave up on it because that book is like 1,300 pages long. And I just did not have the mental fortitude to deal with anything Cosmere related at that time. But I did end up picking up the audiobook of that, and I mean, the audiobooks of the Cosmere are always a win for me. So I really enjoyed that. I obviously ended up giving Rhythm of War 5 stars. I can't wait for new installments in the Cosmere. I also can't really believe that I am officially caught up in the Cosmere. Like, that was the last thing that I needed to read in terms of the Cosmere. Now I don't really know what to do with my life, so I'm seriously thinking about going all the way back to Elantris and just starting from square one, just so that I can see what all of the earlier books feel like now that I know the things that I know that happened later on. I think that it would be a really interesting experience to just go back and read everything with the knowledge that I now have in preparation for the Cosmere related books that Sanderson is coming out with in his Year of Sanderson next year. I have the majority of this year if that is something that I would like to undertake, so maybe I will, maybe I won't, we shall see. The next book that I finished was Age of Assassins by R.J. Barker. I loved this. I had a couple of weekly reading check-ins where I talked about Age of Assassins, and I just enjoyed that writing style so much. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the world. The entire Assassin's Apprentice kind of thing was fantastic, and it's very different. My understanding is that it's very different from the actual Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. The humor was so tongue-in-cheek, so nonchalant. It was exactly my kind of like witty humor that I love to find in fantasy. I can't wait to keep going with the, what is it called? The Wounded Kingdom trilogy. I can't wait to move on in the Wounded Kingdom trilogy by R.J. Barker. Hopefully that means that I will also like The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker, which is one of John's favorite series. So yeah, I will be moving on to book 2 once I get my hands on it, and I can't wait to read that one next. Obviously, in case it wasn't clear, I gave Age of Assassins 5 stars also. The next book that I finished was House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas, and this was an interesting journey for me. I had started off coming off of the high of finishing it with the way that it ended, and I think I ended up giving it a 4 stars. Since then, I have dropped it to more like a 3.5, just because, rounding down to a 3, if we're being honest. There were a lot of issues throughout the middle of it that the ending being as good as it was just did not resolve for me. There were a lot of subplots that did not need to be present or were not handled very well, and so this 800-page book could easily have been 600 pages or less, and it would have been totally fine. The whole thing with the missing kid and the way that the missing kid was resolved, and the whole random lady from the prologue they were trying to figure out if she was dead or if she was not dead, and then we found out what happened, and her whole thing with the prince, it was just, there was a lot, and I didn't really care about 90% of it. The way that the missing kid was resolved was very rushed. I don't know. Or it took too long. I don't really know how to describe my feelings on that. Like, it didn't need to exist at all, and it lasted for a really, really long time when I don't think that it should have, and then when she was done with that plot and she needed to wrap it up, it happened in a chapter. Like, oh, surprise, this is what's actually going on with that. Let's ship him off and deal with this later, so it was done in literally like a page, and it was like, oh, Bryce is so clever to have figured this out, and I didn't like it. I didn't like that at all. Bryce was obnoxious throughout the entire thing with her obsession with Danica and the things that Danica was hiding from her. Bryce in book 2 was very different from Bryce in book 1. Bryce in book 1 was fantastic. I would have liked to hang out with her a lot. Bryce in book 2, like, I just don't understand how many secrets you need to figure out that your best friend was keeping from you before you acknowledge that maybe you didn't know your best friend as well as you think that you did. I don't know. That was annoying. The only thing that I did enjoy were the interactions between Bryce and Hunt, just because I do love them as a couple. They have their issues, but, like, I was pretty happy for them the entire time, except for the ending. If you've read it, you know. So yeah, that's my thoughts on House of Sky and Breath. It's 3 stars. I'm gonna keep reading the series just because obviously I am a fan of Sarah J. Maas. I don't expect this to be the next groundbreaking piece of literature, so I had an enjoyable time while I was reading it, but it did not live up to the expectations of the first book for me. So yeah, I'm gonna keep reading and see where that goes. I would be interested in seeing how the Maasverse unravels. The next book that I read was King of Diamonds by Renee Rose. I ended up giving this a 4-star. It was a mafia romance that was honestly really entertaining. It was a happily ever after. It was definitely a dark mafia romance. The reason that I was picking this up or searching it out was because, if you haven't heard, I have been watching The Cleaning Lady over the last couple of months, which is a new show. Fox, maybe? NBC? I don't know what channel it's on. But it's been really, really good, and it was really, really putting me in the mood for mafia romance. And I was not getting the closure that I needed from the romance in the TV show, so I went searching for it in romance novels. And King of Diamonds by Renee Rose, honestly, pretty well delivered on that. I think that it did a really good job. This follows, I don't remember their names anymore because apparently I'm a terrible booktuber. But the girl is a housekeeper in a very high-end hotel casino in Vegas. One day she stumbles into the room of the owner, who happens to be a member of a very large Italian crime family. She's not supposed to be there because she's not cleared, but some housekeepers called out, so she kind of just got slated into doing the cleaning for this room anyway. He scares the pee out of her. I think that actually happens literally. He scares the pee out of her because he threatens to kill her because he thinks that she's there for nefarious reasons, and they have an attraction, and it just kind of jumps off from there. It was really entertaining. I really liked the love story. It was pretty steamy, so that was great also, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Following up with that, I ended up reading King of Diamonds by Sienna Vega. I was, again, wanting one of those, like, dark mafia romance feels. This one was not quite as good, but I still enjoyed it, and this follows a girl who, again, I don't remember their names. She is a stripper in a strip club in Vegas, and she accidentally ends up seeing a guy who is a member of a crime family, or his henchman, I guess, murdering somebody who offended them in some way. I don't really know how that ended up happening. Obviously, they can't let her be a witness to what just happened, but instead of killing her, he ends up kind of like kidnapping her while he tries to figure out what to do with her. They spark a relationship, but not in like a Stockholm Syndrome kind of way. She's literally fighting him back the entire time, and he eventually is like, okay, fine, just go, and she doesn't go, and it was good. It was not as good as King of Diamonds, but I still enjoyed it, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars as well. The next book that I read was Pawn of Prophecy by David and Lee Eddings. This is the first book in the Belgariad, and I read it because it was the first book in our Belgariad along that I'm doing with Z from You Can't Catch Z and Lauren from Lighting Lavender. As of right now, our live show for Pawn of Prophecy is getting delayed until next month. We're going to wrap it into our live show for Queen of Sorcery, which is book 2. So I'm not going to talk too much about my thoughts on this other than that I enjoyed it. I had a good time. I gave it 4 stars. I don't have quite the nostalgia factor associated with it as I do for Polgara the Sorceress, but I still enjoyed it, and I think that it did fairly well hold up. I mean, it's got all of your classic tropes that you anticipate out of a fantasy novel that came out in the 70s or the 80s. I don't know how old it is exactly, but yeah, I mean, you've got the Chosen One farm boy and stuff, so it was entertaining. The next book that I read was The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. This is book 2 in her Bridgerton series. I love Bridgerton books. I've loved them for a very long time. They were some of the first historical romances that I ever read, and I decided to reread them because Bridgerton Season 2 came out last week at this point. 2 weeks ago? Last week. And I loved the book just as much. I mean, it has its issues, as most historical romances that were written in the late 90s, early 2000s have, but in terms of book versus TV show, I enjoyed the book way more than I enjoyed the TV show, and I will leave a card directing you guys to my rant review of Bridgerton Season 2, where you can go and see all of my reasons as to why I did not like it. But yeah, Kate and Anthony, I really adored their relationship. It's much better in the book than it is in the show. And Kate and Edwina, their relationship in the book, again, much better in the book than in the show. So I ended up giving The Viscount Who Loved Me 5 stars. The next book is the one that I DNF'd, and that is League of Liars by Astrid Schultz. I had an arc of this from NetGalley, and it's a YA fantasy novel I did not really love. I only got like 30% of the way through before I decided it wasn't for me. And a large part of that was I had a lot of questions pertaining to the world building, like the magic system. I did not particularly care for the main character. And I don't know, it just didn't really seem like a lot had been happening, and I was 30% of the way through. So I decided that it wasn't for me. I have a weekly reading check-in from last week, I think, where I talk about more in depth the reasons why I didn't really love it. So, you know, I'll link that and let you guys go see my thoughts and see if it's something that you would be interested in, because I think that there are definitely people out there that would enjoy it. I think that it was marketed as for fans of Six of Crows, which is something that I really need to stop falling for, because apparently anything that markets as being for fans of Six of Crows is just not it for me. So I need to stop getting sucked in by that tag. The next book that I read is another arc that I got from NetGalley, and that is A Forgery of Roses by Jessica S. Olson. I enjoyed this. I ended up giving it 3 stars, though. I just don't think that I was really the target audience for it. It read a little bit young, and therefore I just didn't really connect with the main characters. I didn't really connect with the plot. I was really confused about the time period that it was supposed to be taking place in, because it was fantasy, but it was like based off of like Regency England, maybe like late 1800s, early 1900s, but their mannerisms didn't necessarily fit that, except for when like the plot reeled it back in and was like, oh yeah, this is not proper for people of this time, I should be embarrassed or something. But then like other times it was totally irrelevant. Sometimes the way that the characters spoke was a little bit, in my opinion, just like anachronistic for that time. It didn't really feel like it fit. And then other times it was like the author was trying to make it fit too well, and they were like overly formal instead. I don't know. It felt a little bit clunky to me. The magic system being based purely on art and painting was really, really cool. I didn't really have a way to connect with it just because it's not something that I'm familiar with. But if art-based magic and an art-based fantasy world set in like early 1900s is something that you are like, not actually early 1900s obviously because it is fantasy, but like, you know what I mean, if that seems like something that you're interested in, definitely go and check it out. I ended up giving it a 3 stars. And then the very last book that I read last month was Sins of the Syndicate by Lexi James. This was a free book that I had received in one of my Hello Lovely rep packages that I just got last week or the week before. This was another mafia romance, kind of, but it was also bodyguard romance, but it was also Lost Heir romance, and those are all of my really top trigger word tropes for romance novels. But this got 3 stars for me because it was one of those Kindle books that it felt like they wrote an entire book and then split it in half and sold it as 2 separate books. I don't know if that's just purely to make money or like what the reasoning is there, but that's a big pet peeve of mine. Is like, I mean, the first plot realistically did not wrap up, in my opinion. And so where it left off was the climax of what should have been a full-length novel, and it just cut off instead. It wasn't even a real cliffhanger. It was literally just like she cut the book in half, and I hate that. So that is most of the reason why it went down to 3 stars. I really enjoyed the story up until that point. I enjoyed the main characters and their interactions with each other. It had the dark mafia vibe that I was going for. That was apparently the theme of my entire reading month, but yeah, I mean, in the end, I don't really think that I care to move on to book 2, because 1, book 2 is the same length. It's like less than 200 pages and costs $5 for what really should have been 1 book as a whole. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see, because I really liked the story and I do want to know what happens next. So I don't know if I'm going to move on to the next part of it or not. In terms of what I am currently in the middle of reading, I just started Arcanum Unbounded by Brandon Sanderson last night, so I am very excited to finish off. I know I said that I was done with the Cosmere, but like Technically, I do have these last few short stories to wrap up, although also technically I have read a lot of the books that are in Arcanum Unbounded already. But yeah, I started Arcanum Unbounded last night, and I am really liking it. I got to reread Emperor's Soul, which was great. I got to reread A Secret History, which was an interesting experience because I did not like it the first time that I read it. And this time I actually did really enjoy it. So maybe I think my rating for A Secret History is going to go up a little bit. I don't know why that is, but I did actually enjoy it a lot more this time. In terms of the readathons that I was doing during the month of March, I did the Game of Tomes-a-thon, but I did finish all of the books that I needed to for that one. I was the House of Stark, and so my prompts were to read a book with Grey on the cover, which I chose, I think King of Diamonds for that because there is Grey on that cover. I needed a book where somebody was in training, and for that I chose The Hunger of the Gods because there is a character in that is learning swordplay. For read a book with an animal in it, I read House of Sky and Breath, which Syrinx is I don't remember what Syrinx is, but it's like a cat-lion thing. So that is an animal involved in it. And then the last one was to read a book with a quest or a journey, and that is Pawn of Prophecy because they are traveling across a large part of the continent in that book to get to where they needed to go. The group prompt was to read a series, and for that, or to continue a series, and for that I read Rhythm of War. And so yeah, that's all of my prompts for GOT-a-thon, which I really, really enjoyed. I also did the magical readathon gearing up for the Aurelium Academy, which was a week-long readathon in March. However, I did fudge the dates on that a little bit. G said that it was okay. She said we didn't have to stick ourselves to that 1 week, and I took that to heart. Because, technically, I needed to read a book with a crystal in the cover, or the title, or the series name, or something, and I literally could not think of anything else. But I did read King of Diamonds the week before, so I'm counting that. And for an ebook, I picked King of Vegas, which technically, again, I also read the week before, but I did read both of those purely as ebooks. And then finally, the one that really does officially count is a book with a blade on the cover, which was Pawn of Prophecy, because Garion is holding, technically it's sheathed, but it's still a blade, whether it's sheathed or not, but he is holding a knife on the cover of that book. So those are the 2 readathons that I did last month that I completed. I am going to be doing the magical readathon Aurelium Academy this month. I am going to be a mage hunter, so I have a whole TBR where I talk about all of the things I'm reading for that. That's everything that I read in the month of March. This video is getting very, very long, so I'm going to cut it off here. Let me know down in the comments what you guys read last month, if you guys did either of those readathons. I had a lot of fun with both of them. Don't forget to go down to the description box where you're going to see a rep code for Hello Lovely, which is CAT15 for 15% off of your order. Underneath that, you're going to see links to my Goodreads, my Twitter, and my Instagram in case you guys wanted to follow me on any of those. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see any more content from me, but that's it for me today, guys, so I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye!